without changing anything. So I did. I realized I'd changed the stream title and stuff after. So maybe that's caused the problem with YouTube. Fashionable. Hello, how are you doing? Let's see if that works. Nope. YouTube still thinks it's not working. Oh, there we go. Okay. Game Jam. What Game Jam? Ah, no. No. Games dev is something that I'd love to do. I'd love to get into. I just don't know. I've tried multiple times. I just don't know where to start. Dungeon Crawler Jam 2024. Nice. So yeah, I've tended to. I've tinkered. I've dipped my toes a few times into game dev, but too intimidating. Okay, so can get rid of this cough. So the goal for today, I think I need a loading screen or something, is right now I can now click through into a planning item. I can navigate back. I'm not worrying too much about the quality of the UI, more the fact that it's got the ideas in there. If I spend too much time tinkering with the way it looks, etc., right now, I'm not going to get to the point where I understand. Good morning. I'm going to deny that just in case it accepts it and then allows other people to type it. But, yeah. That was quite the greeting. If I didn't think it would potentially add it so that other people could use it, I'd have allowed that just for the funny, just for the amusement. But so Mr. Jones started the stream calling me moron. So the plan for today is to add requirements. So when I'm saying requirement, what I'm thinking of right now, and what I'm kind of experimenting with a little bit, is a requirement is kind of a title and a kind of intended outcome. Hi, Rumbling Geek. Good morning. Hope you're well. And the idea would be that when you start a planning item, you kind of discuss what it is, and then you kind of add what you're expecting from this thing. And the idea is that what you're trying to build is the idea of a story. So the planning item, again, will have a requirement, will have a title and a description, and that description will be the intended outcome, is the way I'm wording it right now. And what you're trying to do is describe, okay, well, I've got this item, this planning item, and I've got this description, and now what do I expect to happen when I see this thing implemented? And it's kind of a way of exploring your ideas and thoughts on the story, and then those requirements can be taken and added as actual expected outcomes of the story when we plan stories. So planning stories will be taking this planning item and generating a story or multiple stories and saying, okay, this requirement, go on this story, this requirement, go on this story. So it's kind of a wish list as such. There'll be more things to the planning item, but yeah, that'll be the goal. So I have implemented the back end for this already. So I have the ability to add a planning item, and I can go to the database and see add a requirement to a planning item and see the requirement added. So now we just need to get the other pieces in there. So the challenge with this system is because it is distributed, nothing is simple, right? Nothing is too simple, I'll say. I could bundle all this into one database. I could put one view against that database, etc. But then this system doesn't grow. It doesn't scale. It doesn't allow me to flex it. It doesn't allow me to distribute that data in different places. So what I lose in simplicity, I gain in flexibility. But now it means that to do something like the requirements, right, now I need to kind of decide, okay, well, now I need to publish that. Sorry. Just use Cosmos DB, right? It'll be a long time before I go back to Cosmos DB. And only then am I doing that when I'm comfortable with everything. I'm not running up bills again. So the way this was is I had a planning item in my planning component, and what I need to have happen is my view component needs to pick that up, right? So first I'm going to need to represent a requirement in view of planning items. Now, ultimately, this view database right now is going to look like all the other databases combined, which is okay. I'm kind of thinking through as I'm talking how I'm going to distribute the data, how I'm going to pull this through here. But let's start by, we can just go and get the script for the planning item requirements. We're going to create a similar table, so it doesn't really hurt to do a bit of copy pasta here. And as always, I forget that it doesn't create a SQL file. I created a ls.view, right? So that's and then planning item ID makes sense. Created by user ID. We're going to do that this way. So in this instance, the user ID is the actual user. It's not the tenant user, right? It means I don't have to have repeats of this. I don't have to have the tenant user identifier. I just have the user identifier. That might come back to bite me later, but I'll figure that out later. So overall, that's okay. Let's go to the view. One day I'll align the keyboard shortcuts. On Mac, Command Shift L opens a new tab, and on this, Control Shift Q opens a tab. But on Mac, that closes a tab. Okay, so I've got requirements in my view table now. So now I have this. So the planning item, the way I've done this, and I'm still not sure that I don't have a bit of a design issue here that I need to kind of rethink. But as a requirement is never created alone. You don't create a requirement without having a planning item. I added a method add requirement to the planning item. So when you add a requirement, you load the planning item and you add the requirement to the planning item. So it's only added through there, which works because the requirement has a list of requirements, and it will load that. But and I can create the relationships later to make sure it queries it properly. it does mean that this object becomes more and more complicated, right? Because this is actually the data storage object as well as there's not so much behavioral. There's not, other than publishing the event, there should be no real behavior in these methods, but that should exist in either the domain service or the actual application layer. But it is something I'm feeling a little bit more unease with when I do this style. So I'm trying to figure out his title. I'll get it wrong somewhere else. I initially called it goal and intended outcome, and then I'm sat there looking at it when I went to create the first one. I'm like, goal and intended outcome are the same thing. What was I thinking there? So I did create a requirement added to planning item, right? And I trigger it for the planning item identifier. I don't trigger it for there's no identifier on the requirement. Because one of the things I'm contemplating here is when I publish these events right now, so when I publish the planning item created, I publish this. One thing I'm contemplating is putting the requirements on the planning item that I publish. Now, for things like notes, etc., I wouldn't do that because the notes could be big, and you do have a message limit size in Kafka. So I wouldn't do it that design. But the requirements, even if there's a couple of dozen, we're not talking about, hundreds of K of text. But I'm still I can't know the use case. That's the problem, right? I can't know the actual how people might use this, and the idea would be that it's free text. So if someone was to come in here and add 24 requirements with extremely lengthy descriptions, right, or extremely lengthy intended outcomes, etc., then the message size of Kafka, which is by default 1 meg, would be hit, right? And that's my concern. So if I publish everything as one object, then I run the risk of coming up against that limit. And it's not an easy limit to just change, because it's not an easy side effect, an easy problem to see. So do I publish a requirement with a planning item? In which case, do I put an identifier on a requirement? Which, again, a requirement cannot exist without a planning item. I mean, technically, notes can't exist without planning items, but I haven't got notes in here yet. It's confusing of me to say, okay, well, the planning item is the owner of the requirement, but then the requirement gets published as its own thing. But in the same, I've got to consider how that mechanism of how I publish. Ideal world, I'd publish the planning item with its requirements. But because I'm not limiting these, and I don't want to limit these requirements are. I mean, we could do it that way and then test it. We can always come back later and flip this around and make it publish those requirements separately. So subscribers requirement right to planning item. So the way I'm doing this right now is I am doing the subscribers are going to subscribe to the notifications. The notifications are this name and then the action that I'm going to perform, because I could do other things in here, right? There are it's not just publishing the integration. So I'm being clear about what I'm doing, right? At a glance. Now, if I'm going to do this, it does mean that this planning item created integration event does need an IEnumerable of requirements. Because I don't have the concept of a data model in my integration events yet, right? The integration event is the data. So this isn't an event, it's kind of a subclass. So that's not necessary. I will set it. And then this one needs to change, right? Because requirements equals, right? But then this event and this event are almost identical in terms of they both need to load the planning item, but they are separate events. I might do different things. I might set different data. I'm going to flag, this is the event source, so I'm going to flag this differently, right? But the core of the code is going to be the same. So, right? So this one is requirement added to planning item notification, right? Because I named the namespace the same as the event, which does give me the benefit of readability here, but it does mean that I have to alias the actual event because I will end up with. Why don't you like that? Oh, because that's the namespace. That's what I actually want. And then this is. Yeah. So that is the name of the namespace, but it's just the name of the event anyway. So it makes sense. So this will give me a reason. That's now planning item title. And now, yes, they're identical. However, they are separate events published and they have different sources. So they're publishing the same data to the same topic from different publishers, but it's explicit, right? I'm not reusing the same. I could create a planning item publisher and have different events trigger it, but for right now, we'll do it that way. So when we add a requirement, we'll publish the integration. This integration will need a topic. No, it's already there. It's already a topic. So by virtue of doing that, now my view, my consumer, will receive that integration event, right, with the requirements. So I now need to decide. I mean, essentially the requirements are here, right? Oh, I have one other challenge there. Requirements aren't just that. I do track who does them as well. Reason being, the I do want to know who did it, right? So if someone comes in here and adds a requirement to something, oh, YouTube finally connected. Nice. So yeah, if someone adds a requirement in here, I do want to know who did it. I don't want to just assume it's the person who is assigned the job, right? So, that is useful information to pass forward. So, here, oh, I do find it as source, yeah. No, I did. Okay, I did. Oh, I know why. I know why. So what I did is I actually created a in my shared kernel. I pass through the user ID of who created things so often. I created a base command that takes a source user identifier in, so that I can be explicit about that part. So I don't know why it decided that was source, but yeah. One more and I'll have proven the need for that. So that will publish. But I think what I want to do is have update requirements as a separate piece. And the reason I want to do that is just from a clarity perspective, it'd just be cleaner. So the update planning item right now goes and acquires the users, right? So it requires the users and acquires the tenant. And acquire, for those who haven't been in the stream before, when I've been doing this, is it's a create or retrieve, right? There's a name for that. But either way, it's basically, it will define a dummy piece of data so that the consistency of the system is maintained. If I don't want to back off this planning item, I don't want to create another queue, I don't want to wait until I've got all the data in place. If I'm receiving this event before I'm receiving the event that created the user or created the tenant, I want to make sure that that record is there. So the acquire is one of, go and fetch this. If it exists, return the ID. If not, create one with dummy data and return the ID. And then later on, when the event for that thing comes in, that thing, because of idempotency, is going to check, do you exist already? So everything's got to check existing, which is okay. It's not challenging, but yeah. So that's why this. So these pieces make it a little bit more complicated in terms of in terms of the handle. So I don't want to add yet more stuff in here. I can build the requirements out as a separate piece. So when planning item has requirements backed update let's just go with that for right this second. Don't need to be super complicated on this piece, but I do want to make sure there's a test there. Early on with the planning item stuff, I switched the order and the the unit test didn't. Well, no, I didn't have a unit test for that piece, so I'd flip the order of the created by and assigned. So at least a basic unit test that I can build upon is better than nothing. Turn on streamer mode. Okay, so what I'm testing here is if I have requirements, I do call update requirements. That's all I'm handling in this piece. So I need to refresh myself on what I'm doing here. So I need the receiver, and there is a sender. I want to mock. I want to test that I invoke the command. Right. Okay. So we made this an arrange act. Protected override arrange. Protected. After writing these tests in water drink water yesterday, I know this has its own set of problems in the way that the tests have to be written, but I do prefer this structure. Private, read only, planning item receiver, subject, and private. What am I doing? Read only. Sender. So sender equals substitute for sender, and subject equals new planning item receiver. So there's our configuration, and then subject dot receive new. So very little matters here other than the requirements. But I still need everything else. So let's get that. Let's get that. So we just need to pass in requirements. That works. So we want to do yeah, something like this. Not too far off. I do want to validate the actual requirements that we pass in are the expected. That's why I paused before. Tenant identifier, yes, makes sense. Planning item identifier makes sense. Yep. Record. That's fine. And then it's going to need period, tenant identifier, period, planning item. This is where it gets a little bit messier. So I don't normally pass objects through the commands, right? So I'm setting something new here. So I have an interim model that I pass back and forth. It's not a domain model. It's not an entity. Kind of want to say it lives in here. Thank you, Kenny. Thank you for the look. Appreciate it. Hope all is well, and it's just a routine vet visit. So, what is this thing? Well, it's a DTO, right? But I don't have any concept of DTOs being used. Oh, well, hopefully that gets sorted out. So, what I've got to do, the challenge is that in this case, there's no real problem because the view doesn't send commands necessarily for this application component. The consumer is sending the commands to application, right? So whatever I have has to be visible to the consumer and the application. It's not domain, it's not infrastructure. So how do I share a list of objects between? And I can't pass through the event. The event is not the intended. It's not a DTO. So I need a model to represent the same thing. Too tired. So what is that going to be? Updating planning item requirements. That's visible to the other side. I'm going to live with that for this second. The challenge is going to be... Oh, I'm going to have to move that now. Otherwise, I'm going to make a mess of namespaces and enumerable requirement. Command. Okay. So do that. So let's make this test pass for right this second. Yeah. Okay. So go here. Do await sender.send new update the planning item requirements. Command event.tenant. It's funny, like that is allowed to do the app thing to present a keyword, and I prefer that over trying to name it more obscurely or avoiding the word event there at all. But the IntelliSense never likes using the word event there. And this is event requirements. So this is the challenge now. Let's select. R goes to new requirement. So actually I could probably make that a record, couldn't I? Just to make it tidier. Volume Football, hello. How you doing? So that would be r.title, r.intended outcome, r.created by user identifier. Sorry. Translation token. So that will pass forward the requirements. And now our test should pass. There you go. So this is always going to get called, and there's no point in doing something like, well, if there are no requirements, don't call it, etc. Because if the requirements are removed, the state of the object will be published, and this is that's why I'm using Kafka the way I'm using it, right? The Kafka publishes, and it publishes the current state of the object. It's not publishing changes, essentially. Changes can be inferred, but it's not publishing. It's publishing, here's the state. So I don't want to do anything clever in here. This receiver should just receive and then call the right things to actually receive that event and call the right things. And this way, the requirements will get updated. And if they are empty, then it's on the requirements handler to empty them out and remove them. So this is going to get more complicated as I go forward, because I'm going to have to say, okay, well, have I got the event? No. Have I got the requirement? No. Because this doesn't have an ID. So I'm going to have to compare on strings. Yeah. This might be overly simplified. Oh well. So, anyone new joining the stream, by the way, I am developing an Agile Project Management platform. Quite a lot of work in it, but it means that some of this is going to seem very difficult or high level, maybe. You're more than welcome to ask questions. You're more than welcome to pass opinions. I reserve the right to ignore an opinion, but it is not about me getting code done on the stream. It's about me writing code and sharing the experience. And if there's questions and discussion, we divert and have questions and discussion. So yeah. That's going to trip me up. Not having an ID on there. Do I want to fix that now? Or I want to fix that later? If I don't put an identifier on there, then the only thing I've got to check to see if requirements are changed is their description, their title plus intended outcome, plus who they're created by. And if you change a character, technically all I can do is insert a new one and delete an existing one that doesn't match in the new set, which is way more complicated than checking to see if IDs exist. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Oh, you have to open the water bottle before drinking from it. Okay, so yeah, why did I not think about that? This is a challenge of I'm trying to think through the features. I'm not thinking far enough ahead on the features because I don't want to spend I don't have a great deal of time to spend contemplating them. But in the same, I want to make the streams boring with me just sitting there thinking about how things should work. So I'm trying to move forward with the project at the same time as doing things, which is more waterfall than it should be. Which, considering the project is an irony that's not lost on me. But either way, can't, and I shouldn't publish these without an identifier, right? The public GUID identifier. That identifier will come when we create it, right? So public GUID identifier. Like, it's not the end of the world to add this. It's just, I don't know why I didn't think about it, right? And identifier equals GUID.newGUID. Now, the problem with this is now this starts to look like something else, right? So if I look at entity base, I have date added, I have last updated, I have identifier, I have ID. The only thing I don't have on this object is domain events. So adding the overhead of domain events, well, it's more about intent than it is about an actual problem here, right? If I add that on, if I add entity base to my requirement, I am saying, oh, and events can be added to this entity, right? But I'm only adding to this entity through the planning item. So what do I do? What do I, how do I tackle this, do I think? Because I've got all the fields. I have, oh, not planning item, add requirement, requirement, ID, identifier, date added, last updated. So if I get rid of that and get rid of that, do entity base there, right? They go away because that's a base constructor behavior. Which makes that tidier. But now I've got to go through the effort of, well, I don't have to go through the effort, but I do have to go through some extra effort because now made these fields private, made these fields part of the base class. The configuration of my, I now need to do this requirement. Right, and this is an entity-based type configuration of requirement. And so the base type will configure ID and identifier date added, last updated, right? So I don't need to do anything more in here because I'm not, right now, I'm not changing them to use anything else. So the idea of this is that I can protect access to the fields and create explicit methods to update things so that I don't void domain events. But being that I don't have domain events for this entity, I don't care right now. That could be a hole that comes back to bite me. So ads are about to start in a few minutes. I do continue working through an ad, But if you are watching and you are interested in what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to let me know, and I will pause while I'm while the ads are on. I mean, the VOD goes to YouTube straight away because I'm streaming to YouTube at the same time. I don't normally stop. So from this perspective, nothing changes. From the database perspective, things change. Requirements now needs an identifier. Right. Drop. That's that. That's that. Tickets, views will now need an identifier as well. Really? We need to make that happen. View requirements drop. Okay. So now when we publish, we need to publish the identifier as well. And so when we add a requirement, now what will happen is the add requirement will occur. I'll then publish that a requirement was added to the planning item. That event will trigger, and this will get consumed, and then publish the planning item with its event, with its requirements. Now we've added an identifier. It wouldn't be too difficult to switch this and then make this just publish the, so on here, add requirement, this could now have grid requirement. Right. So this could now have that. Can't use IDs in here unless I know they exist. So in this case, I'm adding a requirement to an existing planning item. This is never added at the same time, but because of the way that the database commits, I can't say, hey, use an ID here. So the identifier actually gives me a lot of control over that, because if I create an entity, I assign an identifier straight away. Then I can pass that around. So I don't need to know the internal ID of the table to do that. So we publish that, we consume that. Now on this side, this needs an identifier. This is going to change in a minute anyway, because I'm going to have to map these to track that these are happening. Because I don't want to validate that just 2 are being passed in, because I could make up any data there. All right. And this requirement needs a GUID identifier. And then the receiver needs to do r.identifier. So in terms of refactoring, not too costly. It's cost me, 20 minutes at most. But yeah. And I can validate that it's still running. It just gotta. Oh, it's still building. So if I go to planning items and start planning items up, I should be able to go into here, send that, and go to here. That's my requirement with my ID. And I should actually have a Kafka planning item. Really? No messages? Oh, let's see. No planning items? Did you not put? Oh, you didn't. Oh, hold on. Requirement added to planning item. Oh, so that's because the. So oh, what was this caused by again? It's because of the way I set the object up. Is this the event? Oh, well, hold on. This was working perfectly before. So that works. That works. That worked up until I did that. This is flipped as well. This shouldn't be. Actually, I don't. The planning item. If I'm reading it correctly, right? If I'm doing that right, I'm adding the identifier. I'm not doing. The identifier is. That is the planning item, right? So that's a JSON serialization problem. I think this is going to help. I know there's a naming difference. If I name these slightly different, like if I pass in Bob here and call that planning identifier, it will actually fail. Let's run that again and test that. So this will be add list of planning items. Let's see a list. See a list of planning items here on the page. Hi Merlin, how you doing? So we add that. Then we should now have there you go, published everything. No requirements. No requirements. No requirements. No requirements. Awesome. It's not working. I know why it is. Oh, do I know why it is? Oh, that's why. So, okay, that works better. So the challenge, I think, is caused by me not having a definition of builder.property. Here goes to p dot requirements. I hate these things. I hate these things. These are never fun. So that's requirement to planning item. R dot planning item ID. Is it with one? Right, just like these. One, and that takes expression func requirement planning item. But then I have to go to here and say builder that has one. So requirement. Okay, I did create the virtual planning. R goes to oh, that's not right. I dislike configuring these. But I shouldn't have to, because it should have inferred it, because I called them the same. 1 too many. As many posts with one blog as foreign key. Right, so I'm just confused. Okay, yeah. So has many requirements with one planning item. And this one is builder.has one planning item with many. Right, that's just telling it that's the relationship, but that's not telling it how it's related. Yeah, right, okay, has foreign key. Then has see if that'll work. Hold on, that's a requirement? That's a requirement. Has many requirements with planning item. Well, I suppose I don't need to define it both ways, do I? No, hold on. Let's see. So I think what's happening is the query, when it goes to get the here. Oh, I'm an idiot. Dear. So I probably didn't need to do that. Probably didn't need to configure the relationship explicitly because it was inferred by the IDs. When I'm writing a spec, Entity Framework by default won't include the virtual. This will be empty until I include it. But this is a specific spec for, this is a general spec for planning item. So what I need here is specifications, planning item with requirements, spec, planning item by identifier. Wordy, but specification of planning item. A single result specification of planning item. Accepts a GUID identifier. Query.where E goes to P dot identifier equals identifier. And this is dot include. So I'm gonna explicitly tell it to do the join. I think that will do what I want it to do now. Oh no, it won't. Just gotta use the spec. So now in my integration here, I want that to be that. Nope. Don't you recognize that? Specifications. Oh, because I don't need that. That's why. There's no generic there. That's why. Let's try again. There's no generality there. So I do have a general identifier version of the spec. So if I'm just loading an entity by its identifier, and it's a base entity, then I have a generic spec for it. But otherwise, I need the specialization here, I believe. So, more requirements. Should see lots more requirements. So published. He hopes. Yep, there's there. And there is. There you go. There's our requirements. So our event sources requirement added to planning item. It occurred on this time. Last update, day added. So these are the fields of the actual entity. These are the event and the event fields. So now we need to stop running that. Okay, significant changes so far. So now we need to actually go and deal with the events, all the requirements. So implement this actual code. So the receiver receives it, will send the command, right? That's all very well and good. We now need to do a handler. Concerning update planning item requirements. So when requirements when requirement does not exist, that requirement is added. So I'm not going to test things like what if the planning item doesn't exist, etc., because that isn't a thing. Right? I don't need to validate that. So and I also need to come back around on this one and fix that. I want to move forward, but I want to fix this as well. So it's all very well and good to say the requirements are there, but I'm not testing that the past. It doesn't benefit me to have multiple necessarily, because I mean, I'm just, as long as there is one there and it matches, it doesn't really matter whether there's 1 or 10. So let's do this. Let's do expected requirement identifier, expected requirement title, expected requirement outcome, expected requirement created by user identifier. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, come on, don't let me down now. You were almost there. You had it. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Okay, requirement, title, requirement, outcome. Again, it's not title, description. I shouldn't set them to test. I should set those from here as well, I think. So they should be clear what they are. If you see the variable value in the testing, you should understand what they are. So there's no benefit in the dot single single or default dot identifier equals expected identifier and what? Oh, okay. And r dot title equals expected requirement title and r dot and r dot there you go. So now that validates that that is being passed in exactly as I intended to. I was about to write a to-do there, but the reality is that's the sort of thing that you don't often come back around on, and as long as the test's passing, I'm not going to notice it. So unless I'm being rigid about checking to-dos, which I'm not because I don't like using them, then I'd miss that. So here, our subject is update planning item requirements handler. Subject. And we need to, that should be arrange act. Arrange act and our subject. Start. Let's go and at least stub this out enough because it's going to command handler of and results. Yep. And this should handle a new. Yeah, that'll do. So we had the requirement. We're going to pass in a list of requirements. And why don't you like that? Oh, because it needs to pass that in. Because I made it simpler. Okay. I don't know why I just did that because I'm going to have to make all those variables anyway. So. Trusting when I shouldn't trust. Okay, so let's create some variables. Private, read-only GUID, tenant identifier, private read-only GUID. Let's make sure that this is clear what this is. planning item identifier. Again, from the testing perspective, it will aid in readability. The only reason I'm calling it identifier in the actual command is because I'm calling update planning item requirements. So the planning item is the identifier necessary. It's redundant to keep using the word planning item everywhere, especially when I'm using such lengthy names. So that's why I'm doing that. And as always, if anyone has any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to ask. You're more than welcome to join in. I do not need to get this done. If you don't, if you see something that's confusing, and you want to ask, or you see something you don't like, you want to say, open to the discussion. Okay, so private, read only. Got a replacement keyboard coming today. I'm looking forward to that. Requirement identifier. Yep, that'll do. Yep, that'll do. Yep, that'll do. So there's our requirement identifier. There's our requirement title. There's our requirement outcome. And there's our okay. So we need to validate that we actually add that requirement to the database. So we need a model on this side as well. We've got a table, but we don't have a model. So our domain model here needs a requirement type. And this is where it starts to get dangerous, when you start to create multiple copies of the same, pretty much the same object, right? It'd be tempting to use it, like create a shared library and say, well, this is always going to be this, so I'll create shared domain objects. Well, the reality is that would be bad for me, because if I change them, or if I add more features, or I change the way that they are shaped, I can only change it in one place then. So I'm not. So yes, it's redundant. I keep creating classes called requirement. There's DTO for requirement. I could go with some more traditional naming here. I could call this DTO, right? But I've put it in a namespace called DTO. We'll see what that looks like in a minute, because we'll see the behavioral difference when we use the domain object inside of the handler. So then I can get a feel for that. Sorry. But overall, this is, and you can see I don't have the entity base in here. The reason I don't have entity base is because these objects in this, the view is laid out in a similar format, but the objects don't have behavior because they're just view. So, yeah. So public int ID, public grid identifier, public, and again, I actually don't need certain piece of information on this, right? Public int tenant. No, that's planning item ID. So the requirement isn't attached to the planning item. I don't need to have the tenant identifier on this piece of data because it's associated to a planning item, which is associated with a tenant. So what does the table structure look like? So we have identifier, and then we have the other fields. So again, I don't think I need these. I think I can get away with greetings from my holiday home in Germany. Hi, Full Stack. How are you doing? I hope well, being that you're a holiday home. How's things? So I'm not gonna I'm gonna change this up a little bit, right? Because I don't need date added in this case, because date added doesn't really matter because I'm just updating the requirements into the table, right? So the last updated is actually when did I last insert it from, because the only update that can come is from outside. The view itself has no update ability. It can only query. So date added has no value for this, right? For this particular object, unless I pass it through. I'll go with it for now. It doesn't really hold the same value that the other side does, because I actually trap in the I find this week I'm working from my laptop while the family does stuff. Next week I'll have some time off myself. Nice. Time off's important. I need to. I'm hopefully gonna get some holiday time in myself this year. Like to disconnect from the computer is definitely something that the older I get, the more I appreciate the need to do it. Like I love doing this, right? This is fun, but nice, yeah. But it's why I do karate, right? I don't do karate because it's easy. Like an overweight 43-year-old man does not find karate easy, but I do it because it's absolutely no screens, no ability to think about stuff that's work related. It's something that gets me a little bit of exercise, and gets me away from the computer. So yeah, taking time off is very important. Loving what you do is great and dangerous. Yeah. Yeah. This is about to get messy. So that is essentially the same as this one. With I'll have to pick up karate again myself. I managed to get to blue belt when I was younger. Getting black would be nice, but hard, which means that I must do it. Yes, I am at brown belt now, and the school I'm at has a system of stripes. So once you get to your brown belt, you have to retest all the other tests again before you're able to be invited for black belt testing. So over the next 12 to 15 months, I will go to every testing and retest the previous belt. So I just did my yellow stripe. So yeah. Well, Yeah, you gotta be careful. Again, injury comes quicker as well, so it's much harder to do. Okay, so what I'm looking for here is I want to validate the requirements, so I need a repository. Now, the beauty of this is I don't need to follow the same pattern on this side. I can inject directly into a repository. I can create a repository because the way the repositories work, I don't create a single repository for every single entity. I create it's a generic repository. This is Ardalis's specifications library. So I can create a generic repository when I need one. And in this case, I'm going to create a mock for the problem is, okay, it did pick up the right entity there. The problem is that one is the wrong entity. So using requirement DTO equals view application dot update on item requirements dot DTO dot requirement. So that might be where I need to start thinking about the naming, where I need to start thinking about just calling it requirement DTO. Don't like that. I don't like this. I definitely don't like that. But it is technically that's the correct way. But maybe I use the alias in the actual code and keep the code structure looking like it is. So DTO again. So what I'm expecting here is repository dot add async arg is requirement x goes to go on identifier there you go. So I'm just validating that I'm adding that requirement into the repository, right? And then that will get passed in there. I'm jumping a little bit ahead. There you go. So there you go. You can see, you can immediately see the problem. So using requirement DTO equals, and that's actually a requirement though. Type name expected. Oh, you can't alias it there. Well, that's interesting. Oh no, I'm an idiot. The alias the namespace. So I'd prefer using the alias than I would using an explicit namespace reference inside the code. I dislike seeing x dot that in the code. It drives me nuts because it just makes the code look messier. Whether that's realistic and whether that's reasonable or not, I have no idea, but that's my personal approach to that. So quite rightly, that fails with the method not implemented. So let's turn around and add it. So repository.add. So the challenge here is to create a new requirement right? I need an identifier, which is okay. I need a planning item ID, but I don't have a planning item ID. I have a planning item identifier. So I need to be able to load the planning item. So earlier on, I kind of discussed the acquire design, right? So the idea with the acquire is when I'm using distributed messaging, I could get message C before I get message A. I know message A is going to be there at some point. It could be delayed for all manner of reasons, but I assume it will be there. So message C, I've got two options. I either back everything up and wait and just say, okay, no, I'm not going to process message C because I don't have message A or message B even, right? That's got data that I need. So message C, what I do is I go through and say, okay, well, you've got a requirement on this message A data. So what we'll do is we'll stub the record out for message A because we know we've got that shared identifier. We'll stub that record out and create it. And then when message A finally processes it, it will update itself, right? So everything has to do a check on whether it's going to add or update. Right now, I'm writing the simple case of the requirement doesn't exist. Let's add it. Now I'll go write the requirement. Then I'll write when requirement does exist, it should update, and when it doesn't, it should delete, etc. However, in this instance, I can only get to update planning item requirements from having the planning item. But does that mean I should change? Because what I can do here is I can just inject another repository of planning item, right? And I can say var planning item equals planning item repository dot single or default async new right, is entity base. We'll worry about that in a minute. I've got to change that now. So I can do that. And I think it's the right thing to do at this point because I know it's going to exist because I have to have called update. I can only get to update planning item requirements from planning item, right? I can't, or from the consume the planning item event. I can't get to it independently. So yeah, I think it's the right thing to do. Right. If that actually it turns out to be null, then there's a big problem. So that gives us our planning item ID. Title is title dot Need to remember that it's a list of objects. That's not completely correct, I don't think. I think I want a user ID on there. Yeah, I want a user ID. So let's I'm changing a little bit too much here. I should be I shouldn't be changing as much as I'm doing. But I'm also mindful of I want to do this before the end of the stream. So, as always, again, if there's thoughts or questions, though, on what I'm doing, if you have opinions, you're more than welcome to share them. So, this requirement here, that should be user ID, and that should be an int. Public virtual user. So the problem, with doing this though, I now need an iSender. So we kind of talked about, I've talked about this before. So one of the suggested anti-patterns of using mediator is to inject the mediator into your handlers to then send other commands forward, right? Because then you are kind of creating a cascading effect. So it's not advised to do that. In this case, I'm using the mediator in these things, and I don't do this very often, so I'm using it sparingly. But for this, I need to go and acquire the user ID, right? So because again, this user might not have this process might have happened. I actually might not have received the user information at this point. Unlikely, but I might not have done. So I need to acquire it to make sure that the system, the data integrity is there. You'd still see the data, you just see blank name, etc. So this is created by user equals, and this is again a bit different because I'm actually going to require the this returns a result. If result dot is if not result is success, throw new exception. Right. If that doesn't work, then the system's busted. Result dot value. The result should be they added equals date time. Well, no, I already dealt with that. It's defaulted. Yeah, okay. Okay, so actually return. That's better. That's a cleaner design because then I can handle that outside of that if I need to. Right now it'll just bail out. Knock-on effects. Let's come back here. I'm going to add these back in for right a second. So this will break because this spec won't load. That's what they'll be complaining about in a minute. The reason being this identifier spec, it requires the fact that it has identifier, and I can't guarantee that. So I already dealt with it. What's the error there? Is that actually erroring? So I'm trying not to introduce code that will misrepresent the system, basically. So what I'm doing there is I'm trying to make sure that I don't by introducing the entity base, I'd be saying, okay, well, this thing can have domain events and it can have all sorts of other behavior. Whereas in reality, that's not the case. It's because I'm not using the domain events in the view. Even though I'm using a lot of the same code, I'm trying not to blur the lines too much. Okay, so this should build. This test should fail. Oh, no. Yeah. So there we go. That's one of our problems. Private iSender. Private iSender. Oh. Mediator. My apologies for the flash. Sender equals. So what I want to do here is I need to mock private read-only int equals 9009. Actually, I think I do 10,001 or something like that. Good. I try and use larger numbers just to make it. So we need to say, yeah, that'll do. That'll work. So when we call send within acquire, is C goes to C dot. So when we pass it that required user ID identifier, we're going to get back the user ID. Wow, we're almost at time. So an ads is about to start. Again, if you're following along and you want me to pause, I'll pause. Just let me know. If not, I'm going to continue working towards getting this done. If you have any questions, thoughts, opinions on what I'm doing, you're more than welcome to share. I don't mind different perspectives on the software process. So I am always happy to discuss it. So will this should run and fail. It ran and passed because I've implemented too much code. Okay. When requirement already exists. The challenge of creating heavy unit tests. The need to copy and paste is just, yeah. Fact, and the requirement already exists and no changes. Requirements updated. Right, so I'm wanting to, let's do this. Again, I'm doing this in the interest of moving this along rather than I'm not trying to cheat too much. So I'm not going to validate that I'm not adding. I'm just going to validate that I'm not updating. So I want to do repository dot received I have an extension for the is. I was working on the is stuff, right? No, I didn't do anything like on the numbers yet. Again, I'm not a big fan of the dot empty. So what I could do here is fact. Actually, I can, in this instance, I can do that. So I can say, I could say it didn't receive add, but did not receive what's the clean way of doing this? So I don't want to say received. So I can say that. Update async. Feels clunky to test it that way. Right, so that's going to fail because add is, it didn't update, it didn't call add though, it did call add, right? So what we want to do is say repository dot single default So the big challenge of this is you can't validate the specifications. So it's not perfect. We're going to return a new what are we going to return here actually? We're going to return so obviously this is still going to fail because I've not changed the code. So now let's go and change the code. And what I was pausing for there is I'm thinking about, do I actually need to do, will that do what I think it's doing? So hold on. The var existing requirement. So much code. Hold on, some wordy there. DeMarcus, good morning. Sorry, I didn't see the message. How are you doing? So we want to check the existing requirement. If existing requirement is not null, we want to add it. Actually, we want to do something else first. Fine, good to hear it. Good to hear it. Welcome in. So if the existing requirement is not null, but you're just going to fill everything in for me. Not what I want. So if it's not null and it hasn't changed, then we want to bail out. Otherwise, we want to add it. This is where this starts to get a little bit messier. And if it's not null, else we want to add it. Let's worry about that for a second. Wait, repository dot update async. So existing requirement dot title equals so let's go back to our test. So So here I'm testing that nothing's changed, right? So this should still fail because it's going to call update, but it should give me a different error now, right? So it's not added anymore. I expect it to receive no calls matching, but it received one. Okay, so we know that that's valid. So let's go and deal with that. And you can see this is why I didn't want to put this inside of the planning item handler, because adding it in there would have been extremely expensive. Just in terms of readability, right? So if, right? So if it hasn't changed, I'm itching to change this, by the way. The code is driving me nuts. So we do have requirement is not added, requirement is not updated. When requirement already exists and has changes and title has changed, where this gets really wordy now. Because I'm going to write 2 separate tests, the different fields. But I'm going to try and cut down the amount of typing. Not a big fan of doing it this way, by the way. I do like to type it out because I think you definitely understand the requirements a little better. That needs to be a range act. So in this instance, requirement is not added, requirement is updated. Right. I'm not going to cover that because the other test covers the fact that it's done. I don't need to keep repeating that piece. So we need to have this as be private read-only string original requirement title. Are you editing your repository manager's code? No. What I'm working on here, and I'll show you in a second, is I am working on my own Agile platform. So story planning, project planning, etc. I'm building my own, and what I'm working on right now is adding requirements to planning items. So a planning item is a story without without actual points or anything. It's kind of the kernel of information that PMs would use to build the actual definition of the story. Requirements, I'm adding them to the planning item so that they are explicit. And then ultimately, you'll be able to take that and build a story from it for developers to pick up. So what I'm trying to focus on with this project is trying to reduce the amount of time developers have to spend in the software and aid planning and requirements gathering. That's the original. And then received update async arg is requirement r goes to r.identifier equals identifier and r.title equals expected. R.description. Not intended outcome, sorry. Requirement outcome. And r.last updated. Not equal to null. For right this second. So what I'm doing here is I'm writing the test to validate that when I do the requirement when I add the requirement into the system, if it has changed, then I should see that change happen, right? So right now this will fail. Or not. Huh? Oh no, it will. Of course it will, because I'm actually checking it, right? So if they equal each other, then I just skip by. So that is actually validating that will change the actual title. Okay, so let's do some refactoring here. Add new requirement. What have I turned on there? Hi, sorry, Dev. How you doing? Return type. What result handle? Not parameter. Return result by critical error. Yeah, okay. Add new requirement. Result. Is that result? What did I do? What did I turn on? What is this? What I turned on? What is that? That's too abstract for me. I'm going to load somewhere else. Good luck with your platform, though, and have a nice one. Thank you. Appreciate it. Too abstract. Okay. No worries. Hi, one line. How you doing? So I don't actually. I do want to return there because it doesn't. It doesn't hurt. No, don't. If what have I turned on? I have. I've turned on the Japanese keyboard. That's what was wrong. If bar result equals yeah, if not result is success. So if this fails for a reason, right? So this returns a critical error, then this should return that result. That's okay. I'm going to leave the update in there. I mean, this isn't the cleanest of handlers, but it is still doing one thing. Okay, so this isn't perfect. Obviously, it won't deal with delete yet, but I'm not able to do delete yet. I'm not even able to do update. I'm just kind of covering that base right this second. But in theory, if I start this up now, just doing my usual Wednesday morning rush to get stuff ready for this afternoon's client meeting, it's still having fun, but it's been a bit more of the kind of stress that I don't like lately. Ugh. I hear that. I hear that. I want to get this tested. Okay, so in theory, if I start this up, my requirements should be populated on the view side. In theory. Let's see how right I am. No crash, no crash, no crash, no crash, no crash. 7, 8. So we got 8 projects started. So we can take a second for the topic to kick in. Well, there's one lag on the view integration. If it's this one, then we're okay. Come on, clear the lag. It's stuck on this one. Now that could be erroring and hiding the fact, right? So, that doesn't look like it. Well, it did send an update. So because it's a worker service, it does have more of a chance of hiding the error. That is for certain. But that makes it look like everything went through. We're getting planning items updated. We don't have any requirements, but we're not getting any errors on the inserts. So what we do is we go to a planning item receiver. We put a breakpoint here. And then lots more requirements. Which will trigger another publish. So now we got 2. So it's not consuming that event. So let's stop the view consumers and restart them. Oh, I'm mindful of the time. Sorry. So mass transit started fine. Oh, there we go. Okay. again, the timing. Oh. So it did crash. This might crash because I don't have the planning item. This might actually be cleared out the planning items on this at one point, right? So the planning items here are way bigger than the planning items here. So let's go get a planning item that I know that's in this system, right? So again, I'm building it on the basis that this planning item exists already. So all that did then was said, oh, the planning item doesn't exist. Get out, right? Because I'm not handling that. It just returned. Actually, it should have thrown an argument null exception. It should have thrown an exception there because the code was set up to do that, right? So the code was view application. The code here is set up to, if that planning item doesn't exist, throw null. So that's interesting. But let's try and do this one. But there's our requirement for the one we do know exists. Oh. But now I'm throwing. The challenge here is I can't remove these messages. You have no way of changing Kafka. So lag is still 2 though. Yeah, that restarted though. My worry is that throwing null is going to continually just fail. But it's the right thing to do because in reality, this code is already processed, right? So that planning item, actually, it should recreate the planning item, shouldn't it? It should recreate the planning item because the planning item, I'm sending the entity, right? And if I've deleted the entity previously, it should just recreate the planning item. So actually, that should have worked. Okay, so 84153, that's the event. So planning item 84153, so it's this one. So it is for the original one. Let's step into here. Oh. How did that even not complain at me? Why didn't I notice that? Because it has ID on it. A task has an ID. Oh dear. Trying to move too many things at once. Let's see if we can get this to go. And then I'll finish up. So not quite where I wanted to be today, but I mean, the unit tests are important, right? I shouldn't skip past the unit test just because it's quicker. So what? Okay. Quite interesting. Not quite what I expected, but okay. Is there still lag there as well? No, it's cleared everything. So it thinks it did everything. It processed through. It didn't actually add any planning items. Or requirements, or huh. Okay. Well, let's give that one more go because I'm frustrated now. Easy to do. See if that catches up in a second. So the goal of this is basically adding definition to the actual planning item. So, actual expected goals of this planning item and turning them into acceptance criteria is the goal. So this is going to change multiple times. But again, adding the unit test in here, I'm skipping too much on the unit testing to try and get features in during the stream. And that's going to cost me in the long term. So I don't want to keep sacrificing that for the sake of I use that plot. So something's going wrong in here. So what happens is if that thread throws an exception, it will stop processing Kafka. That should be instantaneous though. So something's going wrong in there. Come on. Nodes, topics, lag one. So I'm waiting on this message. Should hit it. There we go. F5, F10, F10. So our requirement looks like this. What? It bails out. So, oh. So that actually processes it though. That's the annoying thing there. So I've got something missing in the I've got something missing in the Kafka configuration because that shouldn't commit that it's received that message until it processes cleanly. But that either determine the fact that bails out. So one, you actually are correct. It's actually hiding the fact that an entity framework exception is happening underneath, that entity isn't added in the context. So that's because the repository is trying to access this. is my best guess so far. Actually, I only need the consumers to start. Oh no, I need more than that. I need... Morning, Napalm. How you doing? I'm running super late today. This is a long stream. So I'm going to have to finish up very quickly. I start work in 5 minutes. But I want to see this work, right? I think we all understand that need. Time for you to pick today's exercise. Physical exercise. Okay. So there's our topic. Oh, there's our message coming in. Okay, so we have F5, F10, 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 F10. There we go. So we have no existing requirement. Get a result is success. Yay! Yep, my wife and I do exercise together each morning starting in 3-ish minutes. Look, one line, thank you very much. Thank you for the look. I'm going to finish up anyway. We have requirements. So the next step is to get these to display. So these will then display as requirements here. And then the next step from there is to actually bridge the circle or close the gap, allow the UI to send that command to send this command, right? So all this was involved in getting this data into the view. The project is growing by the day. But ultimately, the idea would be you have a planning item. A planning item is enjoy the joys that PHP will bring you for the rest of the day. Thank you, Mr. Jones. A planning item will allow you to add requirements. The planning item then can be used to add notes and documentation and everything else to kind of collate the ideas of these things, and then creating stories will be possible off a planning item. So the next step will be to display those on this UI and then move forward. So, not the most successful stream I've ever had in terms of progress, but you can see there's a lot of changes I've made. I'm now going to go through and make meaningful breakdown. Not the best practice for the commit side of things either, but a lot of this is I'm making it up as I go along in terms of the data structure, and that I don't feel comfortable committing often. So once I get into a better pattern of knowing the data structures, adding the features, that's when committing often becomes more feasible. But I will keep working towards that. So I will unfortunately have to take you somewhere else right now. I would love to continue streaming, but I kind of get paid to do a job, and I'm due to start that in 2 minutes. So who should we go to see? I don't have anyone in my list that is this sort of streaming right now. So we'll go raid Biggs. Biggs is making a game. Yep, he's streaming, so that's good. So we'll go raid Beegs. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you for hanging out. Simple game dev. Streaming now. Artificial Portal and Half-Life inspired puzzle game. Okay. We'll go raid Simple Game Dev. I'm always up to try someone else. I will always take a recommendation of someone in the stream. Take care, Walline. Thank you very much. Let's go raid Simple Game Dev. No, you need to raid, not Twitch them. Sorry. Thank you for joining me. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you around. Bye all.